it's safe to say that change is...
The coronation ceremony had ended, but what followed behind closed doors was far more explosive than anything the public was allowed to see. Because this was never just about a chair. It was about power, memory, and a silent war that had been building for months. The bells had fallen silent, the cameras had turned away, and yet inside that private coronation lunch, one empty chair held more authority than anyone in the room was prepared to challenge. It wasn't just left empty, it was protected, honored, untouchable, and still Camilla moved toward it, slowly, deliberately, as if claiming something that had always been denied to her. And then, it happened. Before she could sit, William stepped in, not loudly, not dramatically, but with a precision that froze the entire room. 5 words. Cold, controlled, final, that place belongs to the Queen. Silence didn't just fall, it suffocated. Every eye shifted, every breath paused, because this was no misunderstanding. This was a line being drawn in real time. The private coronation lunch was never meant to showcase dominance. It was meant to contain grief. A carefully controlled space where memory could exist without challenge. And at the center of that fragile balance sat the empty chair, surrounded by white roses and quiet reverence. A symbol, a warning, a presence that refused to disappear. But Camilla didn't stop. She reached anyway. And that's when William's hand came down on the chair. Firm, unmoving. Not just stopping her, but exposing everything that had been hidden beneath royal silence. Camilla froze, her hands suspended in mid-air. And for a brief, devastating second, the mask slipped. Shock, humiliation, fury, all flickering across her face while the room watched. Charles said nothing. And that silence? It wasn't neutral, it was deafening. Because in that moment, the king didn't defend his wife. He looked down, and that single gesture changed everything. It told the room that something deeper was at play, something unresolved, something dangerous. Anne didn't react emotionally, she acted surgically, removing the altered place card, quietly confirming what no one wanted to admit, that this wasn't an accident. Someone had tried to rewrite the arrangement, and they had done it deliberately. Camilla turned to Charles. Did you know? The question hung there, heavy, unanswered, because he couldn't answer. And that silence spoke louder than any confession. To everyone else, it was just a chair. But to William, it was Elizabeth. Not just a grandmother, but the force that shaped him, steadied him, prepared him. The woman who taught him that duty doesn't bend for discomfort. That memory isn't negotiable. And now, standing in that room, he wasn't just protecting a chair. He was protecting a promise, a boundary, a legacy that someone had already tried to erase once before. Catherine had seen it coming. The tension, the unease, the way William couldn't look away from that empty place. He wasn't afraid of grief. He was afraid of what would be done in its absence, because grief can be reshaped, rewritten, weaponized, and Camilla, she carried her own battle. Years of comparison, years of standing beside shadows she could never replace. This coronation was supposed to end that, to finally place her at the center, not beside memory, but above it. And yet here she was, stopped, not by protocol, not by mistake, but by William, in front of everyone. And the worst part? It wasn't just the humiliation, it was the realization that he knew something. Something she didn't. Something Charles couldn't deny. Because this moment didn't begin here. It didn't start with that chair. It started months earlier. Quietly, at Windsor. When a single decision changed everything. The truth is, that coronation confrontation wasn't an isolated explosion. It was the echo of something that had already happened behind closed doors, something quieter, but far more revealing. Months earlier, at Windsor, during a private memorial dinner, the family gathered in controlled silence. No cameras, no spectacle. Just absence hanging in the air like a weight no one wanted to acknowledge. And then Camilla saw it. The chair, Elizabeth's chair, left empty beside Charles. A tribute, a reminder, a presence that refused to fade. And she stopped. Not emotionally, strategically. Her eyes didn't linger with grief, they measured the message. Because that empty chair didn't just represent loss. It represented comparison. And comparison was something she had fought her entire life to escape. So she gave the order. Quiet, direct, remove it, just like that, as if memory itself could be cleared away like furniture. The footmen moved, and William saw everything. He didn't hesitate, he didn't wait for permission, he stopped them, right there, in front of everyone. And in that moment, the room didn't divide, it cracked. Because this wasn't about protocol anymore, this was about control. Camilla repeated the command, calm, controlled, but beneath it was urgency. The need to reset the narrative, to finally step out of someone else's shadow. And Charles? He sat there, silent again, watching it happen. Not choosing, not intervening, just allowing. And that silence? It did something irreversible, because William understood it for what it was, not neutrality. Avoidance. And avoidance, in a family like this, becomes permission. That was the moment everything changed. That was when William made a decision he wouldn't say out loud, but would carry all the way to Coronation Day. Because once you see something erased once, you don't mistake it for accident the second time. You prepare. And that's exactly what he did. When the revised seating plan appeared just minutes before the coronation lunch, it wasn't chaos. It was calculated. Camilla's name placed beside the empty chair. A quiet takeover disguised as continuity. And it might have worked. If William hadn't already been waiting, if Anne hadn't already warned him, if Catherine hadn't already noticed something was wrong. This wasn't spontaneous. This was intercepted, stopped before it could become official truth. So when Camilla stepped forward that day, she wasn't just reaching for a chair. She was stepping into a narrative that had already been written for her. And William? He tore it apart in front of everyone. Not with anger, with precision. And that's what made it devastating. Because anger can be dismissed. Precision cannot. When Charles finally pulled Camilla aside after the confrontation, the real battle began. No audience, no ceremony, just consequences. She demanded an apology, demanded authority. Because from her perspective, she had been humiliated at the very moment she was supposed to be solidified. But Charles didn't give her what she wanted. He gave her something worse. Truth, that the humiliation didn't begin with William. It began with the alteration, the secret change, the decision to act without consent. And just like that, the ground shifted beneath her. Because this wasn't about rank anymore, it was about legitimacy. And legitimacy cannot be forced. It has to be accepted. Anne sealed it, producing the original plan, confirming Elizabeth's final instruction, exposing the entire move as unauthorized, and suddenly, the narrative flipped. William wasn't defying the crown, he was protecting it, and Charles knew it. That's why he didn't overrule him. Because doing so would mean undoing his mother's final boundary, and that was a risk he wasn't willing to take. The lunch resumed, but nothing was the same. Every movement felt staged, every word measured, and yet, beneath that controlled surface, something had fractured permanently. Camilla sat in her assigned seat, but it no longer felt like recognition. It felt like correction, a quiet repositioning, and she knew it. Everyone knew it. The empty chair remained untouched, untaken, unchallenged, but now it carried something more than memory. It carried a verdict. And the silence that followed? It wasn't peace. It was containment. Because outside those palace walls, the story didn't stay buried. It leaked, spread, transformed, until the entire nation wasn't talking about the crown, but about a chair, a single moment, a single refusal. William draws the line. That image became everything. Not just a family dispute, but a symbol of resistance, of legacy, of a future king who had just shown exactly where he stands. And the most unsettling part? This wasn't the end. Because months later, when that same chair returned and Camilla walked past it without touching it, it didn't erase what happened. It confirmed it. The boundary had been set, not negotiated, not softened. Accepted, and in that quiet acceptance, something even more dangerous settled in. Not conflict, not reconciliation, something colder, understanding, because now everyone knew the truth. The crown can pass in an instant, but respect, that has to be earned. And some seats remain empty for a reason.